you. Well, good morning, everybody. It's good to see a full house today. I guess it's a sign of the empty calendars that most of us have, and we've got more time to give. I'll call this virtual meeting of Heritage Oakville to order, and I'll thank again all the staff who worked so hard to put this together for us. There are no registered delegations for the meeting today. If someone watching this wishes to contribute or participate in the meeting, they can call 905-815-6095 and the clerk's department will arrange for that to happen. Any member of the public who is watching and doesn't have the agenda and other materials can get that by going to the website oakville.ca and getting the materials there. The committee members will know by now that you remain muted until you want to speak, and if you let me know by some way or other, I'll keep a speakers list going, and then when you open up, you ask your questions and then you mute yourself again. We have one discussion item and one information item today, and any recommendations that we make today will go to the Planning and Development Council meeting at its meeting on the 10th of May at 6:30 p.m. And of course, that meeting also will be a virtual meeting. So having seen that everybody is here, I know we have no regrets. Can I ask now if anyone has a declaration of pecuniary interest to make with respect to any matter before the committee today? Seeing none, we'll move on. The minutes of the last meeting were circulated. You've all had a chance to read them. Is there any discussion? Would somebody like to give me a motion? George? So the motion is to approve the minutes as circulated. Any further discussion on that? Anyone opposed to that motion? Seeing none, that motion is carried. Now we have one item on the agenda today, and I can see that it's Susan who's on deck to handle it, and that's the outcome of our Heritage Grant Program review, and we're all ears. Sue, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just ask our IT staff to pull up the presentation, please. Thank you. This is one of my favorite reports of the year to give, just because it's great to give away money and to make people happy by funding their heritage restoration programs, projects through this fantastic program that the town offers. And so I'm just going to take you through a few of the highlights of the 2021 application year and show you a couple of the projects that are due to receive funding or are recommended for funding today. That's what's before you. And then we'll be going to Planning and Development Council for final approval. Something really great about this program year is that we actually have a number of churches taking part in the program. And so here you can see photos from one of our applications from one of the town's historic churches. I believe this is Knox. If I could get the next slide, please. So we are now in year 8 of the Heritage Grant Program, which is fantastic. You'll remember that we started as a 3-year pilot program, and then Council has since funded the program just on an annual basis with $90,000 every year. Occasionally we have additional funds to top up that amount, and those additional funds can come from unclaimed grants that have completely expired. They've gone through their 2-year eligibility plus their 2-year extension, and for one reason or another, sometimes the applicants have moved. For example, they haven't been able to use the funding. We are able to roll that back into the program. We also now take fees for address changes to designated heritage properties, and so we've gotten a little bit of funding from that this year. And then there is a large chunk that comes from a developer who had to give the town funding for landscaping in a park that has a heritage feature. They had a certain amount that was dedicated for that, and they only used about half of it on the actual park, and so the rest of it got rolled into the grant program. So just it's good money. It's not because we're penalizing anyone. This is just additional funds for this year, which was incredibly helpful because of the 39 project applications we received, requesting over $254,000 in funding, it's always really hard to narrow those down to the $90,000 that we have as part of the regular budget. So that extra funding this year was very much appreciated. And pretty much because of that, all 39 applications are recommended to receive some level of funding. And so the report goes on to talk about some of the restoration projects that are given priority. But when we look at it overall, from the past 8 years of this program, the Heritage Grant program from the town will have provided over $670,000 in grants to assist with more than 140 restoration projects that have a value of over 3.2 million, which is fantastic. Next slide, please. And so thank you again to our working group who met via Zoom to go through all of the applications. We were able to do it in record time. I've got to say, for those of us who have done it before, it's really nice getting into a rhythm and being able to understand the applications. We go through and we rank them according to high priority. Generally, the highest priority projects are those that are of a structural nature. So the ones that make sure your historic home remains standing. And then we look at the heritage attributes that preserve the superstructure of the house. So that would be your exterior walls, roof systems. Also high priority for the program is historic windows. As we all know, it's a topic dear to our hearts. And so if we are telling people that they cannot remove their historic windows, it is wonderful to be able to tell them to apply to the Heritage Grant Program and receive funding to help with that. We also received a couple of applications for stained glass stained glass repair as well. And then repairs to historic woodwork, repainting, stucco, all of these things that help property owners maintain historic materials rather than trying to go for an aluminum or vinyl finish. They're all important projects. And because we did have some additional funding this year, we supported some smaller projects that may not have been able to receive funding in the past, such as a couple of historic fencing projects that really contribute to the character of our heritage districts and heritage properties too. Next slide, please. So these are just a couple of the projects that are being funded. So we've obviously you can see some of the damage that's going to be repaired on a couple of these houses, as well as our lovely barn there at the back of 1399 Lakeshore. Next slide, please. We've got the cedar roof at 140 Trafalgar Road, painting at the property at Balsam Drive, and then the historic fencing down at the Warren Doorstep, which so many of us are familiar with, being right along the lakefront at Dingle Park. Next slide, please. And then we, as I mentioned, we have a couple of projects for repairs to our historic churches. And so in addition to that first slide, you can see some of the damage here in both the front door that you can see the light of day through, as well as some stained glass that really needs some new support in its caning. Next slide, please. And so the staff report, of course, has more details. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have about them. The second page of the staff report also includes just a summary of what we've given out over the past few years. I gave you that lump sum number, but the second page has a chart that breaks down what we've been able to provide for each year of the program and what the requests have been. So we've always been oversubscribed to this program. There have always been more requests than what we are able to provide. I would still say that the program is a tremendous success, and the recommendation before you today is that the funding allotments as attached in Appendix A be endorsed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Susan. And I think I speak on behalf of everybody that you and Carolyn do an absolutely super job of doing the initial analysis, dealing with the applicants in the first instance and walking them through the process, and then helping us to go through that process. And I think, I didn't hear you mention, but Appendix A is actually the list of all of the grants that are being recommended to council this time around. And you can see what a difficult job it is, because there are so many people who want to do the right thing, who want to maintain their historic homes, which is good for them, but it's also good for the community. It's part of our built heritage. And it's wonderful, I think, that the town has given us money to enable that to happen. I mean, that's a lot of money that we've given out over the last few years, and we just hope that the program will continue and perhaps improve in future years. I feel a bit like the finance minister today, because she was giving out billions of dollars yesterday, and we just have a few $100,000. But what we're doing is pretty effective and pretty focused on the community that we serve. So, does anyone have any questions that they would like to ask of Susan about any of the individual grants or about the process? Councillor Gittings.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, I'd just like to echo your comments. When Susan started, she talked about how the working group went through the process in record time. Having gone through this process on the side of making recommendations for the grants, my guess is the only reason it was in record time was because of the efforts of staff and the hours of preparatory work by those that were involved. Because, as you mentioned, Chair, it's not easy when you sit down and you've got a number of incredibly worthy applicants, and you're charged with the responsibility of making some very difficult decisions. So I'd like to thank you all for the prep work that made it able to be done in record time.
Yes, thank you. Absolutely. Councillor Duddick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Councillor Gittings. I agree, it was definitely the organization and the work behind the scenes by staff that made our work so very easy in terms of process. I wonder if I could ask Susan, could you flip a copy of that presentation to both Councillor Gittings and myself? Because when this comes forward at the Planning and Development Council meeting for approval, Councillor Gittings and I would like to put forth a motion to refer it to the budget for the following year to see if we can get increased funding into the program. It's the old story, you don't get unless you ask. So I know there's a lot of restraints, but I definitely think we need to keep this program front and center.
Yes, I can, Madam Councillor, I can definitely send along the presentation. I will be attending that Planning and Development Council meeting to actually give the presentation as well, or a version of it. And so, but I'm happy to give you the slides in advance if that's at all helpful.
That would be super. Thank you, both councillors. As you say, if you don't ask, you don't get. And this program, I think, helps to maintain the credibility that the heritage process in Oakville has. Any other questions of Susan about the report? Yes, Sue.
Thanks. I agree. It's all wonderful and great. So the question I have is just a procedural one. So in the preamble and also in the application, I believe, the point is stressed that any applicant will only get a maximum of 50% of their ask. Yet there's, I think, 8 or 10 here that have more than 50% of their ask, which is great. I'm just wondering if that lends to some confusion when a member of public reads the record or a new applicant or an applicant that, got less than 50% or something, if it would create a source of tension that it didn't appear to, fulfill a formula that is explained in the preamble.
So just to clarify there, it's not 50% of what they've requested, it's 50% of the project value.
Okay.
And so when an applicant makes their application and they required to submit quotes, we see what the total value of the project is, and their ask is 50% of that to a maximum of $15,000. And so I can tell you that no one is getting even a full 50% of what they've asked for this year, simply because we don't have enough money to give out. Everybody is getting reduced funding from what they have requested, but nobody is getting more than 50% of what they are able to apply for under the program requirements.
Right. So I guess that's just not evident in the Excel chart, right? That's all. So it's just a matter of, to me, presenting the data, because the requested column and then the recommended column, in my head, I thought, okay, they requested 8,000, so recommend is going to be 4,000 or less, but then when it's 6,000, so it's just a confusing presentation to me in terms of the data. Because
okay, well, I can simply amend that chart, because
I think so.
Are reviewing it as part of the grant review, they have the project value as well, and so that can simply be another column that I include in the attachment to council. It's just I've been trying to provide a simplified information package to council, but if it would help provide clarity, I can definitely do that.
Thanks. Yeah, I would find it more clear. Thanks.
Yep, that would make a lot of sense. It was the operation of two caps, and it's sequential. Okay, thank you, Sue and Sue. Councillor Duddock.
Thank you. Actually, Sue focused on something that came to our attention this last year through the process, and that was sometimes we had two applications on one property, and there had to be some clarity going forward for applications that you can only get a certain amount. If you have 3 applications on the property, that doesn't up the amount that you're going to be received. In other words, so I think, Sue, you had mentioned that maybe going forward, we provide additional verbiage so that people are clear that there is a certain amount you'll get regardless, or that you can get, put it that way.
Yes, Councillor, you're correct. We're going to make a change to the application form so that it's more clear to applicants as to the limits of what we can provide. But regardless of what they ask for, the committee is always following the program guidelines.
Good. Any other questions of Sue? Okay, who would like to move that we recommend to Councillor Duddock? So we have the motion now that we, I think it was unusual wording. We endorse the report of staff going forward to the Planning and Development Council. Is there any further discussion on that? Is there anyone opposed to that motion? Seeing none, the motion is carried, and thank you again to Sue and Carolyn for all the work that you've done, and to the other committee members who participated and benefited from it. Okay, good. The only other item on our agenda is an information item, and that's the Code of Conduct for members of local boards and advisory committees, which the town has prepared and circulated. And when you read these things, you cannot imagine that anyone would actually do anything that they're being told not to do. But I guess common sense isn't enough. You actually have to spell it out and make clear to people. Otherwise, they'll say afterwards they didn't know. Anyway, this has been circulated, and it is for you to read and to understand and to file away and be guided by. So all I need at the moment is a motion to receive the information item. And I see Daniela waving her hand, so we'll give Daniela the motion to receive the information item. Any further discussion on that item? Anyone opposed to that motion? That Oh, Jerry, did you want to speak about it?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to ask, in reading it, I wanted to ask the question, were there any changes to this year versus any other year? Just a question to put things in perspective. Were there any changes?
That I don't know. So who could tell us that? Would that be Jill?
Mr. Chairman, I wasn't involved in this. I am not fully aware of the changes, if any, other than updating the document. If the committee does have questions, then the code of conduct would be listed for a future meeting, and Dennis Perlin from the legal department would respond to any committee questions.
Yeah, thanks, Jill. I do see that it was last modified on the 29th of March this year. So I would suspect if it was modified then, that indeed there are changes. So if you wanted to follow up on that, Jerry, we can bring it back. But if it's enough to have the document and to know that it is the latest version, then we would just leave it at that. Okay, we have a motion. Anyone opposed to that motion? Seeing none, the information item is received. Our next virtual meeting is on Tuesday, May the 18th at 9:30. Can I have a motion to adjourn? Does nobody want to leave, George? Okay, we have a motion from George to adjourn. No one opposed to that motion? Seeing none, the meeting is adjourned. So dig out your snow shovels because there seems to be some snow coming. I think I'm just going to leave it and let it go away by itself. Okay, everybody, thank you very much for your participation, for the gift of your time, and we'll see you again in a month. Thanks, everybody. Bye.